Well, a pleasant good morning, sports fans, and welcome to another edition of the PR Man and the Coach Talking Ball on the BallFather podcast presented by Sportskeeda. I'm joined by my co-host, the great Mike Smith, winningest coach in Falcons history. Coach, good morning. How are we doing, man?
Doing great, Reggie. Enjoyed a great weekend of football. I don't know about you, but it was exciting.
You know what? I caught a lot of it. I caught the Eagles, and I caught Jacksonville, and then the team I'm really excited to talk a little bit about is those red hot Detroit Lions, who are playing as good as anybody in the league. So I did catch some. I saw a little bit of the game last night. Was really disappointed to hear that Kyler Murray's got a what seems to be a major knee injury. So that's not ever good.
No, heck no. You hate to see that, and you were watching the ball game and getting settled in the first 4 or 5 plays, and he has that non-contact injury. It's tough, man. But that's football. Yeah,
they sort of struggled. They sort of struggled all year, on the offensive side. But you hate to see that. But you know what? I tell you who hadn't struggled. Those red hot Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, the Eagles, without question, have been the NFL's best team for much of 2022. So, it should come no surprise to anybody following Sunday's 48-22 win over the Giants that, they became the first team to clinch a playoff spot, and with 4 games to go. Eagles are 12-1. It's early to say clinched since 2017. And the really interesting part about it, Mike, we've talked about the Eagles more than once on our podcast since we've been doing this season. They've got a balanced, explosive offense. They've got an MVP caliber quarterback. Well, quite frankly, let's just say it like this: Hurts should win the MVP award. I mean, I think it's not even close. He should win it. And then, and defensively, they can light you up back there with 4 guys. They don't need to blitz, so they can light you up. So, let me just ask you, Coach. And I know we've talked about this. The way the Eagles play both offensively and defensively on special teams, they plus a lot in the give-take chart. They've got a playoff that travels very comfortably in the playoffs, albeit they probably won't have to travel since they'll probably clinch home field. Give me your thoughts on them and as they move forward through the last 4 games and head into the playoffs.
Well, they've been playing outstanding football all season long, and I got to agree with you. I'm now on the Jalen Hurts train. I'm jumping off the Mahomes train for the MVP, Reg. He's playing as well as anybody. And he reminds me, and I don't know about you, but he reminds me a little bit about the way he's playing the game, especially running the football, as Michael Vick. When he was in his prime in Atlanta, Michael was hard to stop. He's a much more accurate passer. And listen to this, man. He's only thrown 3 interceptions this year. Can you believe that? I mean, and we know now, and we've known it for a couple of weeks, that the NFC is going to go through Philadelphia, and they're built to thrive with whatever Mother Nature is going to throw at them. They are set up. They're a quarterback-centric team because he can truly beat you with his arms and his legs. And that's the thing. I mean, it was a complete domination by the Eagles. They ran for 253 yards on offense and sacked the Giants quarterback 7 times, and that's a combination of success in the playoffs. Go ahead. No, but as you mentioned, Reg, that defense, they're number 2 in total yards behind the 49ers. They're 1 in sacks with 49. They're number 1 in pass defense, and they're number 1 in opposing QPR. And when you can rush the passer like they can, they're going to get a lot of opportunities to pin their ears back because of that offense.
Mike, let me ask you this. As everybody knows, you made your bones as a defensive coach, one of the best defensive coordinators to do it in the NFL. Some of those teams in Jacksonville were really, really good on defense. Our defenses in Atlanta were really good for a long period of time. Let me ask you this. When you don't have to blitz and you can get home with 4 guys rushing the passer, how many more options as a defensive coach does that give you when you don't have to blitz and send the corners and the safeties, and you don't have to send linebackers? How much better does that make you as a football team?
Oh gosh, Reggie, when you can get pressure with 4 and don't have to commit a 5th or a 6th rusher, it allows you to do so many different things in coverage. When you rush 5, you're limited in what you can do in terms of the coverage. You may be able to play man free, or you may double one player. But But when you're rushing four, you can play three deep, you can play two deep, you can play quarters, you can play quarter halves. You can give so many different looks as a back end, the secondary and the linebacker to the opposing quarterback, and that makes it much more difficult. And that's why you want to be able to not have to put a fifth or a sixth rusher and play cover 0 or cover 1 all game, because it's man to man, and if they win on the route, there's a good chance it's going for an explosion or a touchdown when you're playing cover 1 and cover 0.
That's a really good point. The other thing I like what you just said, that they're positioned to do it a bunch of ways to win. They can run it, they can throw it, they can stop the run, and they can stop you, and they can stop your pass game. And they seem, I'm thinking earlier in the year, and I thought this earlier, we talked about this. I thought earlier in the year Kansas City was the most complete team, But over the last couple of weeks, watching Philadelphia play, and specifically this past Sunday against the Giants, I mean, watching Jalen Hurts cut them apart surgically like he did as he was passing the football, and then defensively. I mean, it got to be towards the second half. That wasn't even fair. It was a mismatch. And the Giants are a pretty decent football team. I mean, it's just the way they can beat you. If they've got to slug it out in the run game and the elements are bad, they can do that. If they get a nice day in Philadelphia, there may not be nice days weather-wise in Philadelphia in the upcoming winter months, but they can beat you a bunch of ways.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. I thought that the Kansas City Chiefs were going to be the number one team in the NFL, but right now, without a doubt, it's changed. There's a little kryptonite over in the AFC called the Cincinnati Bengals as far as the Kansas City Chiefs are concerned. They've struggled, and I'm a little bit worried. If they match up again in the playoffs, no telling what's going to happen, because the Bengals have their numbers. But Reg, we got to talk about the Giants a little bit too, because this is a team that started so fast to start the season, and they've lost they're winless in their last 4 games. They're 0-3-1, and that's not the way you want to be trending in December. And the Giants, by the way, they have, I think, the toughest schedule in their remaining 4 games. They got to play Washington, Minnesota, Indianapolis, Philadelphia. The only way I see them maybe making the playoffs is if Philadelphia decides to rest. They've got number 1 seed wrapped up by week 18, and they don't play their starters because there's a matchup at the end of the season between Philadelphia and the Giants, and that may be the game that they need to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think you might be right. I think you might be right, but I think that's accurate from that perspective. That I think 2 things, and no one's talking about this. I think offensively they hadn't played real well, but I think in the back end defensively, they lost the one kid who's the safety back there, McKinney, to an ATV accident during the bye week. I think that's hurt him. I mean, he's a hitter, he's an enforcer back there. And then if you look at it, since he's been out, they've given up a bunch of yards and a bunch of yards passing and a lot of touchdowns in the pass game since he's been out. They're obviously not the same team without him, and they haven't been playing very well.
Yeah, they haven't been playing very well, the last 4 games, Reg, and they need to get a win as bad as anybody in the NFL right now. They need it, but that's what happens this time of the year. The cream rises to the top, and I don't know about the Giants when it gets to be late December if they're actually going to have enough to push their way into the playoffs.
It'll be worth watching. It's worth watching as we go down the stretch of what I call the last 4. Because there'll be a lot of position, a lot of teams changing, jockeying for position. And I think you're right. I think the Eagles, play two more games, get in. As soon as they lock up home field advantage, I think you are going to see, Coach Sirianni rest a bunch of guys who don't get to play a lot or get to play, and they'll, be sort of rested and getting ready for the second season. I tell you a team that might be in trouble of making the playoffs, and we talked about this all year. There's trouble in Tampa Bay. When you look at the standings in the NFC South, you kind of want to just shake your head. I mean,
I shake my head every time I see them. Can't believe it.
I mean, one of them is, because of the way the rules are set up in the NFL, somebody from the NFC South is going to make the playoff, and somebody's going to win the division. But you look at it, you're 6-7. And the Bucks. Be honest with you, Mike, and you and I have talked about this offline, and we talked on the podcast. They've been a mess. They've been a train wreck for much of the season. The stuff with Brady, then the divorce, and then the quarterback goes to back to his hometown for the second time in San Francisco, and they just get their brains beat out in San Francisco by a rookie quarterback guy, the seventh round pick who played at Iowa State. And then after the game, I read today Michael Silver, who's very close to Brady, as you know, Coach, wrote a column in the San Francisco Chronicle saying that Brady, got on a, went to his house, didn't take a shower, and then all this stuff after the game surfaced. Where he's going to play next year. One report's got him playing in New England. Another report's got him, got the Saints firing Dennis Allen, and Sean Payton's going to go back there and he'll going to play quarterback for the Saints. Still, other reports have him, headed back to Northern Carolina to play in San Francisco. So, Mike, you're plugged in. You're as plugged in as you've always been. What do you think about what's going on in Tampa, and where do you think Brady winds up playing in 2023?
Well, Reg, there's so many options, and I wouldn't discount the golden parachute that he has with contract with Fox Sports. It's waiting for him. And what is it, 35 million?
30, between 35 and 38 is what
lots of bread.
Whole lot of bread.
Yeah, a lot of money. I really don't know, but you're so right. This has been really since the end of the season last year. This has almost been like a soap opera going on. He retires, he comes back. The coach steps down. The defensive coordinator's the head coach. And then they come out and start the season, and they're not playing good, and they're not very sound in what they're doing right now at times. I mean, there's guys running wide open on the defense. They're having a hard time protecting the quarterback. The right tackle, I don't know, he probably leads the league in holding penalties and false starts. I mean, he's really struggling right now, and he's been a good player in the past, Donovan Smith. But it's tough. It was really tough to watch. I mean, the Bucks were completely outclassed, Reg. What was it, 35-0? And I mean, they took off. They stepped on they stepped on the brake, took their foot off the accelerator. The 49ers did. And what is so special is this performance was the third string quarterback, man. And the third string quarterback, they've gone through two. Trey Lance, who was their opening day starter, he's out. Week 2 injured. Then the former starter comes back, Jimmy Garoppolo, and he seems to be now out for the season and unlikely to come back for the playoffs, is what I'm hearing.
Yep.
So it's tough, man. It is tough times right now in Tampa Bay. But there is a silver lining. The division's so bad. I mean, it's so bad. Probably going to have a losing record, win the division, and they'll get a chance in the second season. And when you get a chance in the second season, man, anything can happen. Who knows? So those are the things that are great about the NFL. But you got to really praise what San Francisco's doing with the third string quarterback, and that defensive unit is really playing good ball. And DeMeco Ryans, he's going to be on a lot of lists for the next couple years, and he may only be on it for 1 year to be a head coach in the National Football League.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the Bucs a little bit. The one thing that they did really, really well during their year they won the Super Bowl was Brady's connection with Godwin and Mike Evans was unbelievable. I mean, both of those guys went to the Pro Bowl. They both had 1,000-yard seasons. You talk about two guys that look like they're not on the same page. The one play they hit Evans going down the right sideline, wide open. He beats the corner. It was a busted coverage, whatever it was. And then you're right. The Donovan Smith's hold is called for holding, and that one comes back. Another time, he's a couple of times during the game, he's wide open, and the ball's behind him, it's over his head. What do you think's going on with Brady and his timing? With I know Godwin's been out because he's been hurt, coming back from an ACL injury. He hadn't practiced a whole lot. But what's going on with him and Mike Evans? What do you think, just from what you've observed? What's happening there?
Well, they are not connecting like they have in years past. It's it's tough to watch. I mean, you're used to watching Tom Brady, be surgically cut up defenses.
Absolutely.
and put the ball in the most unbelievable places that only one guy can catch it, and that being the receiver he's throwing it to. Who I don't know the answer. I hope it's not Father Time starting to kick in, but it may be. I mean, we all have an expiration date, but they have not been, on the same page. Now we got to look back. Some people will say, well, Tom missed the first 2 weeks of training camp, and that's when you create those connections with one another. So I don't know, but there is a thing that the 49ers have got to deal with is another injury. The wide receiver Deebo Samuels, he left the game with an ankle injury. I'm sure everybody is hoping that it's not a high ankle sprain, but we'll find out about that in the near future.
Sure.
I think they'll play it close to the vest in terms of getting information out, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's a week or two before we really know the extent of what his injury was.
Yeah, I saw something today saying that it's not as bad as they feared. That's just what the report says. I tell you what, though, watching them, they're 9-4. Watching them on offense, I mean, defensively, they're as good as anybody in football. They are really good. I mean, they're on. I would say defensively, them and the Eagles might be 1 and 2. I mean, they're playing unbelievably well on defense. The 49ers are.
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt about it. Right now, those two, the statistics will show that for the most part, but they're deceiving. But at this point in time, they are the two best defenses in the league, in my opinion. If you had to say this week who's the best defense, I would say that it would be the Eagles and the 49ers.
You're spot on that. One of the things that I learned when I was in the league, specifically when I worked in the league office in the early 90s, was there were all these focus groups, and the league was really big on focus groups to gather information about, what fans want to see and what's popular in America with teams. And one of the things that they came up with was that the league is better and the league is more popular when the Detroit Lions are playing well. And we all kind of looked at each other when the guy who was talking to us about this was at a PR meeting in the early 90s. We're talking about, and he goes, the league, the TV ratings are better. The merchandise sales is through the roof. The numbers are better when the Lions are playing good. So if the Eagles are the hottest team in the NFL right now, then the second best hottest team are the Red Hot Lions, who've won 6 of the last 7, and suddenly find themselves with a chance to win their final 4 games and make the playoffs for the first time since 2016. When you looked at the Lions earlier, they were 1 and 6, and they were struggling bad. They were really bad on defense. I thought my man Aaron Glenn might be in trouble, defensive coordinator. But they figured it out. Okay, and Mike, we talk about this, and you say it every time to our media in Atlanta. This is a quarterback-driven league, and you go as good as your quarterback. And Jared Goff's playing out of his mind. He's got, he cut the Vikings up Sunday in a 34-23 win. The Vikings have scored at least 30 points in each of the last 7 games. So tell me this, after a rough start, the Lions are trending obviously in the right direction. I think it would be great for the Lions if they sort of win 3 of the next 4, win their next 4, and get to 10-7, and that probably could get them in the playoffs for the first time in 2016. What do you think?
Oh yeah, Detroit is, they're the best story of the year. There's no doubt about it, in my opinion. And I think a lot of people think the same way. The Detroit fans, it's been a rough go. I mean, don't count them out yet. They got a chance to be there, and they got a good chance, in my opinion, because they've only done it 3 times here in the 21st century, as I think you mentioned. I mean, the last 20 since 2000, we clicked over to 2000. They've only been to the playoffs 3 times, But I got to tell you, leading up to this game, I was reading the different websites and checking things out and just looking to see what people were saying about it. And I was shocked to see what the line was. The gamblers must have known something in this game, because they made the Detroit Lions the favorite in this ball game. And they knew something that I knew. The Lions had a very good defense, and the Vikings are really, really struggling on defense. The Lions offense is great. the Vikings, they're really struggling. They went into this game as 32nd in yards per game, 25th in points, and 25th in QBR. And they're not going to go deep into the playoffs, in my opinion, unless they get that defense fixed, because you've got to play defense in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So I'm happy for Jared Goff. He's a former number one quarterback of the Rams. He took them to the Super Bowl. They didn't win. They decide to go and make a trade, bring Matthew Stafford in, and shoot, he's playing like one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league right now.
I mean, he's unbelievable. I mean, he
is.
The offensive line for the Lions has been really good. They've scored 30 points. Goff hadn't thrown a pick in 5 games. I mean, the ball's coming out quick. He's throwing it fast. I mean, they've got the running backs playing good. I mean, they are playing as good as anybody in football. And I'll tell you what, like we talked about in the past, if they get in at 10-7, I can assure you that nobody will want to play that Lions team. They won't. Nobody will want to play them.
Yeah, hey, if they can get in, and their schedule is really favorable if you look at it. They got the Jets, Carolina, Chicago, and Green Bay. And what a story that will be, for all the Detroit fans. And it's just it's a great story that every year we have 3 or 4 really cool stories, and I think this one is a really good story. It really is. I hope they make it. It'll be great. It'll be great for the NFL, and I hope they go deep into the playoffs. It'd be fun watching. 3
of those 4 games are on the road, but odds are that the Lions will probably be favored in all but one of those games. I would guess.
I would guess so too. They'll be favored at Carolina, Chicago, and Green Bay, the way that the Packers are, playing, and they finish up at the Packers. But we beat up the defense of the Minnesota Vikings, but we've got to give kudos to one of the offensive players in that offensive group, and that's the wide receiver Justin Jefferson. In the 2 weeks the last 2 weeks, he's broken 2 records, one a team record and one an NFL record. 2 weeks ago, he shattered the NFL record held by former Viking Randy Moss for the most passing yards in the first 3 seasons of his career. Moss held the record, Reg. Moss held the record with 4,163 yards through his first 48 games. Jefferson is blown by it. He recorded that in the 3rd quarter after 44 games. So, that says a lot about that young man breaking Randy Moss's record. And then this past week, he broke the single game Vikings record, going for 223 yards on 11 receptions in a loss, but it's still, he's done some really good things. And I'm shocked, and I don't know about you, but does Kirk Cousins look like a different guy since Kevin O'Connell's been there?
Completely different guy. Just think, it makes you think of, we were talking about that the other day with another buddy of mine. I was talking to him. Can you imagine what his numbers would look like had he had O'Connell the whole time of his career? He's playing as good as anybody in the league too, as far as his statistics. He's playing out of his mind. He really is.
There's no doubt he is. So, they may be able to come over their deficiencies on defense there in Minnesota with, believe it or not, Kirk Cousins and the way he's been playing. But, you got to carry a defense into the playoffs. And I'm a little bit concerned about Minnesota's defense when they get into the tournament, because they're going to get into the tournament. There's no doubt.
They'll get in. Well, just to finish up, you really shouldn't be that surprised that Justin Jefferson's playing as good as he is, because he is a Louisiana guy. He is a Louisiana guy. There's some good ones,
and there's some good ones that come out of that state, Reg. There's no doubt.
There are.
I know you had to get that in there, and that's good. Hey, there's some pretty good cats that come from Florida, my home state too.
Please, the league's full of them.
Yeah, but so they got a bunch of good players that come from Louisiana, and you should be very proud of it. We are down in Florida.
I am. You know what? As well as the Vikings are playing on offense, we got a different thing going on in the Music City in Nashville, and they've fallen on tough times in Nashville. I mean, they've been in the news the last couple of 3 weeks, and not for the right reasons. They turned in their best performance on November 17th of the year when they went to Green Bay, going into Lambeau Field, we both know it's tough to go come out there and win. But they went in there and had probably their best game offensively, and they beat the Packers 27-17 on the road, big road win, 7-3. They're 7-3 coming home to Nashville. They get home hours after the game. You know, the offensive coordinator, Todd Downing's arrested for DUI charges. And since that arrest, you know, the Titans have struggled on offense, defense, and they dropped 3 straight. And then last week, just out of nowhere, you know, the owner relieves John Robinson, the team's longtime general manager, of his duties. And there's all this stuff about why they let go, why they let go. We won't need to get into that. But let's just talk a little bit about that, Coach. I mean, you know, I can't remember, and I even looked this up. I can't remember a GM being let go with 4 or 5 games left in the season. A GM who's been successful, a GM who's been in the playoffs 4 straight years, 66-43, including 0 losing seasons, and they're going to make the playoffs this year. They're probably going to win the division. What are your thoughts about that and what's going on? Are you thinking what's going on in Tennessee?
Well, Reg, I did the same thing. I tried to look it up and see if that's ever happened before, and I couldn't find any record of it happening. You know, and hey, Google's pretty good. You know, it can give you some information, and you know, write that as the question, and you don't get any response. But you know, I don't know what's going on there in Tennessee. I don't know if this is like a overreaction coming from the from ownership, because these guys have been to the playoffs. They're doing things right, you know, and, you know, Amy Adams Strunk, you know, the daughter of longtime Oilers and Titans franchise Bud Adams, you know, she pulled the trigger and made a decision that they were going to go in a different direction. And by the way, I think they just re-upped him last year. I think he got 3. Yeah,
he got three.
Yeah, he's got 3 more years. It just, I don't know if it was an overreaction because the Eagles, you know, they torched the Titans last week.
Right.
You know, the receiver AJ Brown was a Titan, and they let him go. And maybe it's just rolled over into the, you know, that embarrassing loss that they had to the Jaguars.
Right.
You know,
right.
But this could be a trend. Who knows? You know, maybe GMs are getting evaluated in season. Up to this point in time, you know, was always evaluated after the end of the season. Maybe they're getting evaluated like coaches are. But you know, my biggest thing that I want to find out is if this trend is going in a different direction, that means that Mike Vrabel is going to have more power. And maybe what they're going to do with the Titans is they're going to do what they've done at most of the successful teams in the NFL that are head coach centric. I mean, and if you think about it, Reg, the teams that are head coach centric, if you look at over the last 10 years, maybe 12 years, if you look at the New England Patriots, the Kansas City Chiefs, the Seattle Seahawks, the Buffalo Bills, the Baltimore Ravens, the San Francisco 49ers, and Pittsburgh, they are all head coach centric. It's not the GM that's has the top spot on the org chart. It's the head football coach. And maybe it's going to switch back, and we're going to see more of that happen. And then, we'll watch and see. We'll see if Mike Vrabel gets more power. He's going to be the guy that's going to be calling the shots.
Let's examine that just for a second, because you named 7 teams that have one word and one word only that they do a whole lot of: winning.
Absolutely.
Winning. They've done a lot of winning in Pittsburgh. They've done a lot of winning in New England. They do a lot of winning in Baltimore. They do a lot of winning in Seattle.
Yeah.
Who was the other one? Kansas City. All they've done is win since Coach Reed got there. They've been to Super Bowl twice. He's won one of them. So
and you got to include Buffalo in that. And I think San Francisco.
Right.
John Lynch is a great guy, but I think that Coach Shanahan is the guy that's calling the shots there in San Francisco in most situations.
I've always felt this, and we talk about this amongst ourselves. PR guys, we talk about everything, but you would think that the guy who is out there every day with the players, with the coaches, in training camp, in OTAs, in mini camps, you would think that the guy who's the coach, who's got his finger on the pulse on every part of the organization should be the guy with final say over the roster. You would think that just that's one of those things that just makes sense. And you know what? You're right. I think, with everything that was written when the GM was let go, you would think that might be the trend based on what's happening, because it seems like more and more organizations are going that way, because the 7 examples that you listed, those are great examples. All those teams do is consistently they're in and out of the playoffs, and they're in the late season discussion about the playoffs. I think you might be right.
Yeah, well, in Reg, there's been a trend going on that's really bad for coaches in the NFL. There's been a lot of what I call one and dones and two and outs. Sometimes coaches don't make it, past their first season. Sometimes they get done, they get fired after 2 games or 2 seasons. It's a bad trend. And then over the last 4 or 5 years, I can think of 7 or 8 guys that have been one and dones, and there may be a one and done this year. They're in Denver. You just don't know. There's, as we talked about before, there's new ownership in there, but we're talking about some negative things about getting fired and all that. Let's talk about something positive. Let's talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars and what the Jaguars did in this ball game. As you mentioned earlier, when we were talking about Detroit, they completely throttled the Jaguars. What a difference a week makes. And that's what's so exciting in the NFL. Did you watch any of that ball game?
I watched Jacksonville. I just so close to me. I watch him, and the quarterback. I'm in love with the quarterback. I love it because he was a big time guy at Clemson, #1 pick overall. He's a big time thrower. He really is a big time thrower. He really is.
Oh yeah, and he had his best game. And this wasn't a complete blowout. This was a 14-7 game in the first quarter.
Right.
The Titans, they came out and then jumped to a 14-7 lead, and then they turned the switch, the Jaguars did. And Lawrence had his best game. He went for 368 yards and had 3 touchdowns, and he also ran for 1. But as you watch that game, the big difference, Reg, it was a game where turnovers really determined it. They were +4 on the turnovers, and then they put a lot of pressure on Tannehill. I mean, they just came after him and they sacked him 4 times. I'll say this though, Reg, they're showing a lot of improvement, and let's give Doug Peterson and his staff credit for the process that they've made thus far this year. They took over a dumpster fire, right? I mean, it was a dumpster fire. So they've got, they had a long way to go. They're not mathematically eliminated right now, but it's going to be a long shot because their schedule's not very
it's tough.
Yeah, it's not very easy. They've got Dallas this week, then they got to go to the Jets, and then they've got Houston, who should be a win, and Tennessee to end the season. And I guarantee you that the Titans and Mike Vrabel, they are going to be looking for revenge after the way that they played this past weekend. So the Jags, they're 1 year away or 2 years away from really being a threat. I really believe that, but I think Doug Peterson will get it done.
I couldn't agree more. I like Jacksonville because like I said, they're near and dear. Right, they're real close to me from a geographic perspective. I just think it's better when they're much like the Lions. I think the league's better when they're playing good, and I like the quarterback. Hey, look, I got a couple of things that the boss sent me a note about. A couple of evergreen questions he wanted to ask. This. Let me just throw this out. He said, when you were the coach of the Falcons and you had a chance to sign either Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, which one would you have signed and why? I'm not putting you on the spot because I know you know.
Oh gosh, that's hey, if we could have signed either one of them, I would have been real happy.
Yeah.
Every fan would be real happy. You're talking about, the greatest quarterback of all time and probably the second greatest quarterback of all time. There's no doubt about it. With the record that Tom Brady has put up, he probably would have to be the choice. I mean, people in Atlanta would say, hey, would you want a 5-time Super Bowl or a 6-time Super Bowl winner or a 1-time Super Bowl winner?
Yeah, I think that's got to
I think, and that's no respect to Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning has been so great for the NFL. I think he changed the way that the game was being called and played with his ability. Once they saw that you could give a quarterback the ability to call the ball game at the line of scrimmage and give them the freedom to make those changes, it made being a defensive coach a whole lot harder once they started doing that. You know, when they were allowing those guys to check out, get into different plays, now it's, you know, everything's has an opportunity to get checked off at the line of scrimmage with all the quarterbacks. And really, Peyton Manning was the first one that mastered that.
Oh, he was unbelievable at it.
Yeah.
He's
no doubt. So that's a hard question that the boss man gave you.
Yeah, he said, this was a little easier because he says, you know, people over the years talk about who the greatest coach was. They talk about Lombardi, they talk about George Halas, they talk about, you know, Tom Landry, Don Shula. And he said, but he's asking me, you know, according to you, who's the best head coach of all time? Bill Belichick has always been leading the conversation in the past, but is he really the greatest? I think that's up for debate. I really do. I mean, I think if you know, I know Belichick's won the most Super Bowls. And if we use the same argument that we just had for Brady, so it would be him. But, you know, Don Shula was pretty innovative. You know, Papa Bear Halas was pretty good. You know, the guy whose name's on the trophy was pretty good.
Oh gosh, every one of those guys that you mentioned, and Coach Shula, I think he still has the record for the most wins, if I'm not mistaken. And I know that Coach Belichick
is close.
He's close, and I'm sure that he wants to take that mantle where he's the winningest coach to add to all the success that he's had. Right. You know, sometimes there's a lot of luck in coaching. And people will argue and sit there and say, yes, what kind of coach would he have been without Tom Brady? And that's a tough discussion to have, because he's been very, very successful with the New England Patriots, and a lot of it had to do with Tom Brady. But hey, the coach, you don't always get to choose who you have on your team. My dad used to tell me, I guess it was a long time ago, that, hey, the good sign of a coach is if he can take yours and beat you, and, hey, let's just switch teams, and you coach my team, I coach your team, and let's see what happens,
Yeah.
And, hey, I don't know that there's ever, when you start having these discussions of all time, that there's ever going to be a consensus that there's only one, number one.
Exactly.
You can't disregard what Vince Lombardi did in his era, or Curly Lambeau way back with the Packers.
Right.
Don Shula, what he did in Baltimore, and then what he did in Miami. But I think that here, at least in the last 30 years, there is a correlation usually. Good quarterback gives you a better chance to win in the National Football League. And that's why everybody's trying to get one. That's the big focus point, because as we've said many times, Reg, it is a quarterback driven league.
The boss, we'll get into this next week. He wants to kind of do a segment next week. We can talk about, predict the entire NFC playoff bracket, seeds 1 through 7 through both conferences. And then we can talk about, he wants to talk a little bit about who we think is going to get Super Bowl. I'm going to remind him that we've done that. But we'll just We'll update it. We'll update it next week.
Things are changing. Things change. This is the most exciting time of the season, in my opinion. It's not the playoffs. It's this little stretch that lasts 4 weeks, the run up, because there's so many people that have visions of grandeur that their team somehow is going to make it into the tournament. And then if you get into the tournament, you got a chance to win it all. That's the thing.
That's the beauty of it. One thing I used to do when we worked together in Atlanta was, I liked it when we were, 11-2, 12-1, 12-2. When we had some great years where we were dominating. We were great at home. But it made it easier for me, because I used to have a little card that I carried around for our media, because they'd always ask me, who do we have this? Who's the next 4? And then I had all of our opponents who they played in the last 4. It's an exciting time, because you're on TV constantly. You're being talked about on talk radio, national sports radio, local sports radio. You're on the internet. I mean, your phone's pinging all the time with media asking questions. And I think this season has been so exciting for the fans in that right now there's a bunch of spots open for teams who are streaking. You know, the Lions have a chance to make the playoffs for the first time since we discussed in 2016. The Jets have a chance to get to the playoffs for the first time, and Lord knows when. The Giants, who started out really, really great, they got to fight some, but they're going to be part of discussion. The Titans, who started out great, they've hit a speed bump, but you know what? They got a chance to get in. So this next month, I think it's going to be unbelievable.
Oh yeah, man, and hey, the great thing is that we get to talk about it.
It's talk,
you know, and hey, and there'll be some crazy things happening in the last month of the NFL regular season, and that just leads up to playoff football. And let me tell you, playoff football is right around the corner. And you talk about being able to dig deep into the games and talk about them.
Yeah.
And the plays that help one team, the plays that hurt another team, that's going to be so much fun.
You know what? Well, you know, one other thing I'd love to get your opinion on this before we go. We could talk more in depth about it. This year, and maybe I'm wrong, or maybe I just hadn't been paying attention, but I know you pay attention to stuff like this. It involves the officiating. Is it me, or if I just missed this? I haven't really heard a whole lot of complaining, or I haven't seen a lot of stories about the NFL officiating this season. Am I missing it, or what's your thought on that?
Reg, I think you're right. As I just quickly scan in my brain about, has there been a whole lot of calls that have blown up in the news and made the news? Now there'll be some calls every game in the stands that people are gonna talk about, and I think they've done a good job. It's the hardest job in the world, in my opinion, is being an NFL official. The game's so fast, and we do a good job. When I say we, the NFL does a great job every year of evaluating what went right, what went wrong, and how we can tweak it to make it better. I still, my defensive mind keeps thinking about, we're getting the ability to play a little more physical when the ball's in the air, and it's kind of changed, and they've gotten more consistent in the calling of pass interference. One thing I hope they don't do, Reg, and I know it's going to start being a discussion, is they're going to maybe take a look on replay for penalties, and I think you're opening up a can of worms. There's so much subjectivity to holding calls. There's so much subjectivity to pass interference calls. It's easy to see a guy jump. It's easy to see a guy line up off sides. But that game is fast, and we don't need to be slowing the game down and having guys having an opportunity to challenge penalties. I think as the coach, as I look back, and every year I would do this, I would say, well, there was a couple that didn't go our way, but there were a couple that, guess what? They went our way. They're going to even out over the long haul. Those, the officiating crew and the officiating department there in the NFL, they work their tail off just like everybody does to put the best product out there on the field. Yeah.
Listen, man, I've enjoyed it. This has been great. I wish we had another hour we could get on and talk about it. But tell you what we do get to do? This time next week, we're going to be doing the same thing on the PR Man and Coach Talking Ball on the BallFather podcast. Listen, have a great week, and I'll be in front of the TV. I think there's three Saturday games this weekend. Aren't there 3 games on Saturday?
There are, Reg. There are. But hey, Reg, I got one quick thing.
Okay.
Did you see the bonehead play?
Oh God!
With the Raiders. Come on, man. It's crazy.
Come on, man. I think that was on. Come on, man.
Was it? I mean, was it? Because it's got to be the boneheaded game of the year. Look, I started to pay attention. I'm a numbers guy a little bit, and I started to pay attention. At the 2-minute warning in that game, you know what ESPN said the probability of the Rams winning was? 94.6. according to ESPN, they had a 94.6 chance, to win the game, and they lose it. I mean, yeah, hey, it was a great story to see Baker Mayfield come out and not even be in a uniform for 2 days prior to it. But you gotta be smarter than that, man. You just can't do that. It's first down on the 22-yard line, and Mayfield gets sacked. They got no timeouts. The clock's gonna run, and Jerry Tiller knocks the ball out as he's trying to hand it back to the quarterback. I mean, unbelievable. That would be one that I would definitely get a red face when the guy got over to the quarterback. And the Raiders, God bless them, but this year they have found so many ways to lose ball games.
Right, late in the game.
Yeah, it just blows me away. It just blows me away that they each week they can top themselves. But that's a little bit that was on my mind. Just had to rant a little bit.
No, you're good. No,
God, hey, really excited for Baker Mayfield to come out and have a one really great game and a great story, because he's had some tough times here of late.
Yeah,
and
he
the Rams have really struggled.
Yeah, he has. But you know what? Hey, things happen for a reason, and maybe this is the start of something good for him. The wonderful thing about it, he's got 4 more opportunities to sort of show that maybe he's the guy, and he can get into a competition, and maybe that becomes the story. He goes out to California and reinvents himself, and becomes the player that he was in college, or close to a facsimile of the player that he was in college. Yeah. Either way, we'll be checking it out, and like I said, there's 3 games on Saturday, and there's a bunch on Sunday, and we'll chop it up and add some stuff, and we'll be back next week and to do it again, my man.
All right, buddy. Good.
Enjoy your week.
Okay, bud.
All right. See you.